Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Beer, Head of Global Channel at Chorus Cyber, also joined by my colleague Mr. Jones. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Jones, and I'm Head of Cybersecurity at Chorus Cyber.
So today we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the recent news that E5 security is going to be available as a bolt-on license to Microsoft 365 Business Premium customers. From our perspective, this is pretty huge news. We're taking something that is essentially enterprise grade and making it available to small to medium businesses and really enable them to kind of progress from EDR technology paired with managed detection and response services and really kind of evolve into the XDR space, covering their wider environment, which from our perspective is really, really important. We've been pushing for this for 2, 3 years now, and it's really based on the requirements of our end customers, the organizations that we're looking after from a managed security perspective. We kept seeing kind of consistency where Microsoft 365 Business Premium customers were essentially adding bolt-on Defender licensing to their licensing to then enable them to adopt XDR. And I think we're going to talk a bit about the E5 security bolt-on and what's included in a short while, but I think the best place to start, if that's all right, Mark, is kind of why SMBs are starting to adopt XDR in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a few aspects of this. I mean, let's start with the fact that SMBs are being increasingly targeted. A few years ago, I'd say enterprises were the big targets for cyber criminals. They were the big bank heist, the big payout. And I would say that enterprises have responded. They have bigger budgets, they have big teams, they have access to the technology they need to defend their businesses, and they've improved how they secure their environments. And the cyber criminals have responded, and the response is this downshift towards targeting SMBs, which typically don't have the same teams, the same resource, the same budgets that they need to defend their environments as well, and so are often easier targets for cyber criminals. So there's a real need to defend SMBs. I think in recent SMB research, 1 in 3 SMBs suffered a breach in the last year. So we see the numbers are rising. It's a growing threat. And then I think why XDR? It needs to be XDR because that's the right technology to enable us to monitor and see all the types of attacks in the best way, and also give us the best chance to contain those threats early and stop those breaches from happening or becoming very, very serious breaches. So it's really the technology that SMBs need to stay ahead of the growing speed of attackers.
Yeah, absolutely. The attack surface has expanded significantly.
Yeah. People are working remotely. People are using the cloud. There's a lot more areas to defend these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to the areas that customers are looking to defend, if we're looking at a business premium customer, they get access to Defender for Business from an EDR perspective, and that's really where it focuses. But we saw customers starting, to need coverage elsewhere in their environment. Quite commonly, Defender for Office P2 from an email perspective. We've seen Defender for Identity for those hybrid environments. We have a significant portion of our customer base who have hybrid environments, and that's where Defender for Identity comes into play. So I think in terms of the areas that customers are looking to cover, kind of what are they looking for? What are the areas of consideration, and kind of how does that pair with a Defender tool?
Yeah, so I think a lot of our SMB customers or business premium customers have kind of tried to piecemeal XDR together by picking up one of these Defender licenses, as you say, or a couple of the Defender licenses, as you say. And I'd say most commonly, I would say SMBs have some on-premise network or some reliance on Active Directory. Active Directory is now a very old technology. There's typically a lot of vulnerabilities in old Active Directory environments. Some companies might be at some stage of their cloud adoption journey where they still need that. So Defender for Identity to cover kind of on-premise identity threats and cover Active Directory, I'd say is a really common bolt-on that we see adopted by SMB customers. You mentioned Defender for Office 365. I think for all SMBs, email and phishing attacks are a huge threat, whether that's through email or Teams or LinkedIn or web chats or however that phishing attack happens. It's a huge threat for SMB. and a lot of businesses respond to that threat by purchasing Defender for Office 365 P2, and then that gives a managed security service provider like Core Cyber the ability to threat hunt across email data and email logs. And it also gives us the chance to use response actions to deal with email-based threats. So that's another one. And then I'd say thirdly, we have some customers who maybe work very remotely, maybe are all cloud, are using SaaS applications or auth applications, and need visibility and session controls, these types of things. They're looking for a CASB solution, so they would use Defender for Cloud Apps. And those are probably the most commonly used bolt-ons we see in our customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it does result in individual bolt-ons being bought from a Microsoft Defender perspective. So there's a huge amount to consider when adopting more of an XDR type approach to looking after your security. Obviously, you've outlined a number of kind of individual Defender tools there. I think what we see, especially in SMB, there's a couple of things that are being looked at. Native integration being a key focus area. Using Microsoft 365 Business Premium, the customer is highly likely to be using, OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams. They might have some workloads in Azure or something similar. So, ultimately, Defender tooling is going to natively integrate with that ecosystem. So it would be, appropriate for that to be considered. And to have an E5 security bolt-on available that natively integrates with that makes sense, and it makes it easy to consume and easy to integrate. So a lot of these customers are either doing this for the first time, so they might not even be leveraging Defender for Business, but we're leveraging Defender for Business, and they're using the productivity tool set, and then bolting on the additional Defender tools to natively integrate with that ecosystem starts to really make sense. On the other side, we do have a bunch of small to medium businesses who are consolidating tooling. They may have adopted XDR with third-party solutions. They may be well covered, but then really understanding, what cost that is to their organization, from an individual, tooling subscription standpoint, how efficient that is, how that all integrates together. We're starting to see customers review this ecosystem and actually start to shift towards that holistic view of the Defender XDR and what that enables them to achieve. So from kind of the bolt-ons and what customers are looking to do, what's actually included in the E5 security bolt-on and what's available now today?
Yeah, I think we talked about a couple of the elements that are included in those licenses, and ultimately, the best XDR is going to be the one that covers everything, and I think that's what that's what the E5 bundle will cover. We're going for holistic coverage of everything, at a price point that isn't as extreme as it was before. I wonder if you could, before I jump into all the different components, talk about what the saving is for
absolutely.
SMBs.
I think so. Looking at Business Premium and adding on tools like Defender for Office P2, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, Entra ID P2 also crops up quite a lot. You're looking at around the $28 per user per month mark,
For all of them.
For all of them together, for all of them stacked. When you look at the E5 security bolt-on, that's the same tooling available for $12 per user per month. So that's quite a significant saving that can be made, especially for the customers who are already doing those bolt-ons. They can save well over 50% there on that price point, but also makes it really compelling for customers who are consolidating from other point solutions, or if they're uplifting for the first time and they're moving from EDR to XDR. It's a neat package.
It's a clear path.
Very clear, and it's ready to go. It makes it really simple.
Cool. So if I jump into the components, then we have Entra ID P2. We've mentioned that's going to give you some very advanced identity protection, cloud identity protection. That covers things like user risk, sign-in risk, these dynamic detections when users do something that's anomalous, and we can put some very clever policies in place around what happens when they hit certain risk levels. We talked about Defender for Identity, which is kind of on-premise Active Directory coverage there. We talked about Defender for Office 365 P2, which gives us the ability to kind of take response actions against email threats, do some threat hunting against email kind of logging. We talked about Defender for Cloud Apps, and kind of That's your CASB solution covering SaaS apps, OAuth apps, seeing if there's any shadow IT being used in your environment, and all of that's part of this E5 bundle.
So clearly, it is really advanced tooling. It's extremely capable tooling,
Mm-hmm.
and we've laboured the point, but it's available in a neat package. You touched on something kind of really really important there. Obviously, Defender XDR is a set of technologies,
Yeah, yeah,
but the ability to take those response actions, integrate it appropriately, tune the environment, bring things into a SIEM tool, is it'll be a challenge that SMBs will start to embark on next. How do
yeah.
you respond proactively, 24/7? I wondered if you could touch on kind of your view on how we achieve that. From my perspective, we're taking a licensing SKU that's easy to consume and enterprise grade, and we're looking to compare it with an enterprise grade service to give the customer a full solution to enable that organization to leverage the full solution, technology and service together. So, in your view, how do we start to eke out that value from the tool set using response actions?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a really good point. I think the conversations have always all been about the technology, right? And SMBs now have the technology to protect themselves to the same level that much bigger enterprises are able to protect themselves to. They can get the same kind of tools, the same kind of coverage there, but you also need mature processes and you need specialized people to deal with that. And I think the challenge for SMB is we talk about the response actions. Attacks happen very quickly. There aren't these long dwell times anymore. Um, if there's a phishing attack, 2 years ago we said an hour and 12 it took for a successful phishing attack to result in compromised business data. That figure is now 10 minutes. It's automated for a lot of tools. Our response time needs to be ahead of the attacker time. And to do that, you obviously need people manning the tools with the right processes and procedures, the right playbooks to follow when things happen. And it's really difficult for SMBs to hire specialists and to have kind of 24/7 coverage. And I think that's where an MSSP like Core Cyber comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that, Mark. I hope that session was useful. If anyone would like to understand, where E5 security is applicable, why it's appropriate to your organization, then please do get in touch. We're here to support. We operate via multiple different partners and distributors across the globe, across the UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and North America. So if you need any support, please do get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.